there's a big movement on work is changing. Job as what we are doing is changing. And that is because when it says, I'm going to do your job to everyone, then people look at it and say, wait a minute, what is my job? What is it that I do that it can do or it cannot do? So it's kind of stopped because there was this whole hype and claims, but that has made people stop and think about how we teach, how we learn, how we communicate, what kind of social beings we are, even our feelings.
Welcome to Engines of Creation. I'm your host, Cristian Mastrodonato. We spend a lot of time on this show exploring how to manage complexity, and few systems are more complex and less understood than the large language models currently reshaping our digital infrastructure. My guest today is Sudha Jamthe. Sudha is a technology futurist who has taught at Stanford and educates hundreds of thousands of professionals on navigating the AI landscape. Her newest book, Large Language Models for Linguists, tackles a critical systemic vulnerability in the current AI ecosystem, the homogenization of human culture. Sudha points out that while generative AI was built by scraping the world's data, it inherently treats language as mathematical data, effectively stripping away the cultural nuances, histories, and individual meaning embedded in human communication. We discuss how the open source community is countering this by fine-tuning models to represent localized culture rather than relying on a monolithic top-down AI architecture. In this conversation, we also examine the necessary transition from basic ethical AI, which historically focused on patching biased datasets after the fact, to responsible AI, which demands adversarial thinking at design phase to anticipate and mitigate systemic misuse. Finally, we look at the role of the individual in navigating this uncertainty. As AI systems claim to automate an increasing number of tasks, Sudha argues that our most effective response isn't simply learning more about AI infrastructure. Instead, it requires ruthlessly auditing our own unique human skills to solve highly specific, localized problems that algorithms cannot replicate. Before you dive in, if today's exploration shifts your perspective on how we design our digital infrastructure, please share this episode. And to ensure you don't miss our ongoing investigations into managing complexity, make sure you subscribe to Engines of Creation wherever you listen. And now, let's go! Welcome, everyone, to Engines of Creation podcast. Today, we have a very special guest, Sudha Jamthe. And she's very special because, first of all, she was the very first guest of our podcast many years ago. And it's great to have her here again, talking about a lot of topics related to what we discussed a few years ago, but also observing how the world advanced and all the new things and new problems and new opportunities in particular that we have in front of us. So for the listeners who might want now to go and check back that podcast, because there are still a lot of relevant things that we might refer back to actually. For the ones that didn't listen to that podcast, I don't know, you can introduce yourself, please, to our listeners.
Thank you for having me here, Chris. I appreciate it. I am Sudha Jamthe. I'm a technology futurist, and I get excited about technology, the latest trends, but coming from working from tech industry for many decades and having been a technology industry and written and about this in books, given talks, and done classes to brilliant learners, I ground myself on, is this creating business value? Is this here to stay? Is this hype or is it creating value? And so I'm a technology futurist. I have 8, I believe, courses on LinkedIn Learning, serving 100,000 learners, and I've taught at Stanford and multiple places. I also published research in peer-reviewed journals on 3 areas. One is about inclusion in autonomous vehicles. And the latest now is software-defined vehicles. Another is human-centered design or AIX design. And the third is, of course, about AI and trends and latest in AI.
And I don't think we could find a better guest to discuss some of the issues that we are actually constantly discussing in the podcast with other guests around AI. I think you definitely, with your expertise of teaching people about AI and AI implications, can give us a different perspective. So let's start really about learning. And you have been going through a lot of changes into teaching AI to people. I remember few years ago now when we were teaching at Stanford and continuous learning, and now move to LinkedIn and all the online courses you're providing. And so definitely there has been a shift, I assume, into the way it's taught, also from the point of view of the capabilities that are available. But also I would argue about the quantity of information that people need to learn to really upskill about AI. So how would you suggest people to look at the problem? I'm sure a lot of people around here, they want to upskill. They can be technologists with the perspective of, okay, I want to stay relevant. They could be in product, in business functions that they understand AI is changing the way business it's run. So how can they upskill?
So I have been teaching adult learners, professionals in industry, so product managers, data owners, business owners. And then I expanded to all the different job roles like designers and legal and accounting professionals and whatnot. And my recent extension is into humanities and linguists. We'll talk about that later. So if I take a step back, having come from my experience from Silicon Valley and technology industry, software is built not by just the engineers, but a whole bunch of roles around it. And so initially it was software, and that software switched to AI. And when it switched to AI, it was about data. And suddenly the engineer doesn't have the data. The engineer has the ability to build the Python code, the stats model, and all that. And so suddenly the business person, data owner, came into the middle of building AI. So that is where I started teaching AI to professionals, saying, you are going to be, and we're talking about machine learning at that time, like 3 years back, pre-Gen AI. Machine learning, computer vision, at that point it was NLP, was all about training with a data set and then retraining and improving till you get to a modeling stage where it solves your business problem. And so the business acumen of the data owner and business owner becomes important, so they could do feature engineering and things like that. So was my focus. So that was my focus when I was teaching. I introducing as 3 different ways of, doing AI essentially, right? Then at that point, I always said, it's fine. It's about, what kind of data that the AI needs, that it's called machine learning or deep learning or NLP. It doesn't matter. At the end of the day, it has to do something good for people. And so let's think about this ethically. Let's think about what customer problem it is solving. So that has not shifted now with Gen AI, and Gen AI has also become more mainstream because of the chatbots everywhere. And so now when I teach people, there's a set of people who want to move into AI because every job is asking for AI. So they're coming from users of AI to builders of AI, which is one segment of people who are career pivoting into AI. So I have a lot of those. Out of my 100,000 learners, I would say 60,000 of them have taken my agent AI course, but 40,000 of them are coming into AI from other fields, right? And then there are others who have learned AI from me or from other sources and think or thought they knew AI, but then they feel that they're not able to apply that in the jobs, or things are shifting around them. And there's always something new each day in the AI world, and they feel like they're missing something. And so that's the second set of people who have forgotten that AI is not built just by the latest, greatest technology. It's another tool. Now they have to take what they know of their skills and experience and business acumen and do some transferable skills to make it work. Again, the focus should be on, what is AI doing? What problem is it solving for my industry, for my customers? So that's the second category. A third category is people completely outside of technology industry who are looking at the ethics of AI, because now we are talking about, hey, AI is changing how we teach in education. AI is making claims on mental health and infringing on psychology and other fields. So people from our humanities and other fields are looking at AI and are having opinions on AI from their usage of AI. So I would like them to learn AI. The way I teach is I teach using no code, though I came from being an engineer. And I believe everyone should learn the inner workings of AI, and I teach that an English version of the inner workings of algorithms. And then they can have an informed opinion on how is it being done, what is its capability, what is hype, what is real, and now what is their role to change it, to shape it to their world. And that world could be geographically anywhere, or it could be different industries or different realm of living, essentially.
I'm thinking about the broader implication of the work you have been doing in general, all these different people that are approaching AI. So definitely one message I'm getting, which might sound obvious, but still, I would argue we didn't see that happening so quickly for other technology. I'm thinking about the mobile phone or even more internet. Okay, so it looks like this is now what we call generative AI is moving really quickly into everyone business. It looks like everyone is getting into a place where, okay, I need to do something about it. I don't think there are similar uptakes in technology. I'm talking about probably to a technology futurist, maybe to look at back in time count, but looking at the pattern, it sounds like this is different. This is moving really quickly, and a lot of people are somehow anxious on I need to jump on this and I need to understand. Otherwise, I'm just basically going to be out of business. Is it a fair observation?
That is true. That's very beautifully put. And there's always been, like, reports about how fast mobile technology was picking up when mobile was the big thing. And in my career, I used to work at PayPal and eBay in my corporate past 10 years back. And I had headed mobile analytics, then I had built out social analytics. And so we compare each technology at that point of time and say, this is accelerating faster than the previous technologies. But it picked up after Gen AI much faster, right? And AI in its original form of traditional, what's called as traditional AI now with the computer vision and machine learning still creates value. And there are applications and it's good to learn. But after the chatbots started reaching everyone, it has happened. And I believe the reason is not just it is doing anything better. In fact, it is doing some harm, that we should not be using Gen AI for everything, though there is good value with large language models and the like. But the reason is AI was trained by data that was collected in data sets and fed to train the AI. With Gen AI, they basically built models from the world's data. They went and picked up data from the internet. They picked up data from, all kinds of images that is out there in all kinds of Getty images, everything that's out there. And there was also this collecting data without permission for training. So there's like all these musicians' music that's out there, or GitHub codes that's out there. Essentially, AI got trained by everyone's data. That's why it's in everyone's business now. It's not that it's creating new value for people who were outside of the realm of AI in the past. Previously, it was more methodical, saying, hey, now we have large volume of data and AI can process it faster than humans. Let's build machine learning and deep learning models, right? And then now it's basically taken the world data, yours and mine and everyone else, some with permission, some without permission. So now it knows too much about everyone, and it claims to do everyone's job. So now we have to stop and say, wait a minute, what does it know about me? Is that good or bad? Do I want it to, keep doing whatever it is going to do with my data? And does it really know to do my job? And the question, there's a big movement on work is changing. Job as what we are doing is changing. And that is because when it says, I'm going to do your job to everyone, then people look at it and say, wait a minute, what is my job? What is it that I do that it can do or it cannot do? So it's kind of stopped because there was this whole hype and claims, but that has made people stop and think about how we teach, how we learn, how we communicate, what kind of social beings we are, even our feelings, right? And our emotions, because AI is doing things and chatting with us and being a little psychophantic. And, so there's a lot of nuances about us and living. And it's writing poetry, and it's claiming to create art. And art is an expression of how we feel, and we as humans feel, and AI cannot feel. So what is it doing other than the claim of art is not really good art, but it makes us stop and think, we create art, why do we create art? And so it goes back to the different jobs. It's saying it can automate many jobs. And can it really automate the jobs? And can it automate it in a safe way, in an efficient way, as a human would do? And so it's kind of made a tall claim that it is doing everyone's job. It's in everyone's business, making people stop. And it's, in a way, it's a good thing, because we were kind of in this monotonous, let's do work, right? And now we are saying, is that efficient work? Is this needs to be automated? I don't want to do this. I want to do this other thing. And so it's kind of making us reevaluate our living in many, many dimensions, I believe.
It's interesting exactly how we can use that as an opportunity to rethink what really means being human. There are a lot of directions that we could explore, and I'm trying to cover a few of those, but definitely opened up a lot of ground here. But I would actually start from your new book, because as far as I understand, you really wanted to look at what are AI implications beyond technologies and into humanities. So trying to understand, I assume you're going to cover some of these topics and many others. So can you give us a little bit more ideas on what we can find out in this book, and has it been made for?
So this is my 8th book, I believe, or 9th book. I have one more in production. So all my previous books have been demystifying technology, talking to the business owner or product manager, people who are technology innovators in various industries, right? And then I have one book on designing for AI, which is also for UX designers. And so now this newest book is called Large Language Models for Linguists. And this is a totally different book, because I found that working with AI and then Gen AI, I found that language is what is making AI connect with us. So when the chatbot is chatting with us, it's talking to us, and we are anthropomorphizing it because it feels human, because it's communicating with language. So that got me thinking about language. And then, like all my other research on inclusion and the ethics of it, I looked at it about the bias and stuff from language AI. And I realized there's something unique about language AI, which is different from everything else. For everything else, you collect data, feed it to AI trains, and it's great. And that's what is being done with language AI also, right? So when the chatbot is talking English or Italian or any language, it has been trained on a data set of that language. I mean, it started with English or, Latin-based languages, and then there are translation data sets or translation technology to extend that basic knowledge to other languages. But there are 7,134 languages in the world, and AI covers 200 of them, or claims to cover 200, but about 90 of them are okay. But then the quality goes down for the rest of the 200. And then past that, it cannot talk to us, right? I mean, people who are speaking all these languages are also getting excited about AI. Maybe the English speaking learners in that countries are introduced to AI, but then the AI cannot translate for them. AI cannot talk to their language. And so I started researching this, and this has been a labor of love for many years. And I realized that the data set is words, but like everything computers know only number, it just treats words as data. There is no meaning to the words. And the beauty of language is in the meaning we give, right? And the tone and emotion that we give in there. Then when we dig deeper, for every language, it carries culture in the language, and the nuance is lost. So I had co-founded and run an organization called Global South in AI for a couple years, where I upskilled researchers from around the world and brought them to present research papers and posters at NeurIPS conference. And from that exercise, I found that people were very optimistic about AI, and there are people from all around the world working on data sets in various languages, and they're trying to teach their language to AI. Or there was one paper on how AI should learn sarcasm in Spanish from Mexico. So there were things like that that are being done by people. So that got me thinking. And so this book is about, first, it is teaching large language models, which is the technology part of it, how it works, but it is teaching to linguists who are people who know language, or how we learn as human beings. And so that in that angle, the 1/3 of the book, the first part of the book, is about teaching LLMs, how LLM works. As I said, I like everyone to know the inner workings of technology in English. And so they know what its beauty is, what its nuances are, what its limitations are. So the message is, it's learning by data. It doesn't treat the words as words. Words is not morphology. Words is just data. And culture is lost. I'm not going deeper into it. I'm just talking about this, right? And then the second part of the book is my years of research, where I'm trying to break down culture into logical components. In language, when we say it carries culture, it carries the history of the people. It carries the learning that has come from people who migrated from one place to another as language evolved. And languages evolved from some other languages. And so there is a relationship of languages that is buried in the current language when you're interacting with it. But beyond that, I broke it down to a framework where I look at words and say, in some languages, based on the culture, it's an individualistic culture versus a very social culture. That shows in the language. If they respect elders, then it shows in the language. The whole gender bias of that community shows in the language. And so I've written sections on that. I've taken indigenous languages. I've taken sign language. I've taken various world languages. And it's not about individual languages. I've grouped a bunch of languages which are affected by history. There are scripts of some languages that have changed because of conquest or war or something, right? And so now when AI is going to learn only because of data, and the books become digitized to feed AI, if there is books in one script, and then because of their history, it changes to another script totally and a different set of books that they are using now, how are they teaching AI? Or one example is Spanish. If you're learning Spanish in Spain versus you're learning any variation of Spanish in Latin America, it carries different culture. So when you talk Spanish to AI, which one is it representing? It's not just the syntax and the new words in the grammar, in the vocabulary, but the nuances that the vocabulary carries in it. So things like that. So I have like a whole section, but I bring in a lot of history and my research from that, but and the various books for the various languages, which is the beauty of language. But I tie it back to who is doing what for that language. For example, when we're thinking about, hey, AI is done in English, but there is a Brit LLM from UK saying, hey, it doesn't represent British English, the various different English of UK, and the nuances of their culture, and and what they want to talk about that is relevant to their rules of the finance market or different things. There is we talked about it before we got started about Minerva from Italy, which is also like trying to bring the culture of Italy in language, and this LLM. So like that, there are LLM for every part of the world. There's a huge movement from African languages and this organizations which are coming together to build the technology to make LLMs understand African languages. There's a big effort in India around the hundreds of Indian languages. There's so many of these efforts that's going around the world. And so I'm just bringing that. So the third part of the book is about who's doing what are the data sets, what are the benchmarks, who are these movers and shakers, what are the different organizations, what are they doing? And it calls linguists to understand how they can bring culture into these data sets, culture carried in language in a very thoughtful way to bring it into language. So essentially it's a call for linguists and by extension, people from humanities to get involved to contribute to make language work for each region, each group, for each language, so that they can focus on what AI should be doing for them. So I cannot sit in Silicon Valley and say, hey, I'm doing this e-commerce site because I worked in eBay, right? So that's not relevant to someone somewhere else in a different corner of the world who want AI to do something else for them. So that's the idea, to empower, to bring AI. So this, what we were talking earlier was how now AI seems to be so ubiquitous and is in everyone's business. Now I want everyone to wake up and understand nuances of large language models and say, yes, it is in my business and this is how I want it to work for me, and to take control and bring their leadership into making AI work for them.
I would definitely like to dive down into the implication of that. But before doing that, I actually would like to refer back to our first interview a few years ago. And I think it's still relevant because you spent a lot of time telling us about what at the time it was called ethical AI, but really about understanding the biases that we introduce every time we build an AI model. At the time, Gen AI was, well, there was GPT-2 around. We were at the very beginning. Things now have changed. But I think those foundations are still there. Probably the name is changed, I think, because I think now I hear a lot talking about responsible AI. So listening to what you're telling us and you were describing in your book, it feels like there is a duty to avoid as much bias as possible from the way we build AI. And as we know, there are a lot of biases in technologies and in the way technology is built.
So I think we called it as AI ethics in the world of machine learning. And the thinking was, hey, AI is trained by data and the data is biased by the person who's collecting the data. So if the team is building it and they do not have enough women in there, they're not going to think about women relevant data in the data set. So we were talking about bias or fairness. And there's a whole bunch of fairness metrics and technologies to kind of mitigate that bias. And we were talking about inclusion to make sure it works for everyone. And so there was this whole movement to bring diverse set of people into hiring, into building AI. And the third thing was explainability, or hey, whatever the AI is doing is a black box. Can we add transparency? And there are again technology models and stuff working towards that. So I would say the conversation about AI ethics was focused on these three topics, and technologists were looking at the data and the bias in the data only. And the focus was to mitigate that bias again using technology, right? So now fast forward, AI is in everyone's business and it's so ubiquitous and it is built with world data, and we cannot go back and fix the data. And we try to fix something, we are going to introduce new bias, our own bias in that process. And so now the way people are talking about this is when you're building AI, build it as responsible AI. Even at that time, I think there were some frameworks called responsible AI, but it was basic fairness, explainability and inclusion, accountability, that kind of thing. But it was not taken as seriously. So now when people are seeing what AI can do, and AI is sitting in chatting with us when we interact with any system, and the potential of the bias that it is bringing. So if somebody is asking for medical help and it doesn't support their language, it doesn't understand their accent, or it's not believing them because of the bias it has in understanding the chat, then it's going to hurt that person. And if you're thinking about this as a business, you're going to, leave a whole set of customers, and, it's bad for business, but it's also bad for humanity if we continue on that way. So there's a awareness that AI is a tool and it can do good and bad things. And all that we've been marketed about how AI is amazing is with good examples. And the same feature that can create something good can be misused and something bad can happen. So the responsible AI thinking is to say, you build something, you think about how it can be misused, and redline it, chatbot, so that, you have to think about, are you gendering and calling it female, and are you giving it a certain personality? Why do you have to do that? So there is responsible AI at design, at data collection, at validation, at deployment, at every stage on what applications are we building, why are we building this, is this something that is ethical and good for humans, how are we building this, are we doing this in a way that is inclusive for everyone, what and the bias is actually something we are facing and trying to mitigate, but the focus is not just on the bias, the focus is on the application and what AI has potential to do and how do we manage it in a way that is you know in align with the world of how we think of what is right for humans, not just like I'm this company, I'm building this and I'm going to go sell more, I'm going to refine my feed so that it get more people to kind of watch this. Instead, think about this as, is this good for humanity? What am I building? If I leave it at this, is this going to be misused and somebody's going to build something? That's not what I'm thinking about. How do I? So we also have to have what I call as adversarial thinking. Today, when we are thinking responsible AI, we don't even need to think of responsible AI bias and everything else. What we need is, we are going to be responsible adults when we build something, and we need to have adversarial thinking, saying, if I leave it like this, is somebody going to take this and misuse it? Then I need to plug that so that they cannot do that bad thing. And so you have to think like the bad guy in some sense. So that's how I would describe the shift from ethical AI to responsible AI.
I think the way you frame the shift between ethical and responsible AI, it's very interesting also because I feel it brings more responsibilities in a way on the builders themselves. It gave me at least a sense of agency. What can I do to use this super powerful tool in a responsible way? And I think that's particularly relevant looking at the uncertain times where we are. So we are observing, as we discussed earlier, an unprecedented acceleration into the way technology is evolving. And we can see everyone is trying to catch up in some way. But it's also from I would say, a geopolitical and job market perspective, there are a lot of things shifting. And also you alluded to the fact that we have to take into account that maybe the tool has been built in some way looking from a certain perspective, but it doesn't necessarily serve my purposes as it is because I might want to use it in another language and so forth. So what should be the steps for anyone to kind of look at it from this uncertain times perspective, considering all the elements you gave us? What should be some tangible steps for our listeners to say, okay, really look at how I can work in AI, especially if I'm coming outside of technology and it still looks a little bit like, how can I say, an esoteric topic?
That's a beautiful question, Chris. One, I want to answer two things related to this. One, I loved the uncertainty topic that you and I spoke in your very first episode, right? We were talking about how to deal with uncertainty as a skill everyone should have at that point. And we did not know how uncertain a world can become where we are today, right? So we were thinking about dealing with uncertainty as a skill to mentally prepare, right? So I think that's still relevant today. So the second thing I would say is the role of the individual and how to benefit from AI, how to survive AI, how to contribute to AI. People do not think of this as, this is my responsibility, I need to do this. Not everyone is thinking like that. People's jobs are impacted, or people who have lost their job have been told AI is doing their job. It might not be AI. They believe, or they've been. So I would say at an individual level, it is time for us to look at what is it that we contribute, what is it that we do, right? Anyone, and I'm especially dealing with people who are out in industry. So today the job trend, I would say, is AI is doing vibe coding. So the software engineer is not coding. They are chatting with AI, asking it to generate code and correcting the hallucinations and training it to build the code they want. So the software engineer's job has changed to do vibe coding. And so they're not hiring very junior people, and they're keeping the mid-tier people in technology industry to teach AI to do their coding. Outside of that, everyone else's job has been impacted with job losses and layoffs, right? And so people are looking at it saying, I need to learn more AI. You don't need to learn more AI. You need to stop at an individual level. and think about, what is my job? What do I bring here? What has been my passion all these years of what I have been able to work on? What kind of customer problems do I solve? What industry knowledge do I bring in this particular industry? If you're in manufacturing, if you're working with IoT, or if you're working in healthcare, in whatever industry you're working in, right? To stop and take an inventory on your own skills, on your own passion, on your own experience, and then translate that to transferable skills, to take today's AI, whatever that is, or today's technology, whatever that is, to say, okay, how do I apply this to solve a problem? And that thinking a human can do, a AI cannot do. So even if AI is claimed to do your job, it cannot think on your behalf and solve your customer problem. If you come up with a customer problem and some potential pointers to where it could solve and prompt it, it could give you suggestions based on its knowledge of past information. But it cannot think for you. It cannot think innovatively for you. That is still a very human skill. And people don't stop and think like that. So if you are looking for a job change or you're trying to get back into the job market, think about what is your core skills and experience, and create some transferable skills for your industry. So that is one I would say at an individual level. So if you are feeling left out and it is not talking your language, it's not representing your culture, it is not inclusive of you in some form, then that is where, again, you don't have to think about responsible AI. You can bring your passion, you can bring the problem you want it to solve and demand that it solves. And again, look at the tools and say, hey, what is it doing? Why is it not doing this for me? And how do I build this? And so again, you can extend. So the way I have seen technology industry evolve over the decades is there's some technology, and then it tries to connect with customers to solve a problem. And so now we all have to bring our own experience, our passion, our demands in to make technology work for us. And that way we can shape it, we can pull it forward in the direction we want, because it feels like it's uncertain because it is kind of stalled. We were focused a lot on models and this model, that model, and reasoning model. And it was more like a lot of different models, but they were not connecting back with customers and solving real problems for them, for enterprise. So now if there are two directions. One is, if you're already in some industry where could potentially solve problem but it's not solving, think about your business acumen, what you bring, and demand and make it, pull the innovation forward. Or if you are left out, then my book is on people who are looking at languages and AI is not doing enough for them, are taking charge. There's hundreds of people that I'm actually listing, and I'll have this on the companion site for the book, where people can go look up their language and see who's doing what. And there's one technology called fine tuning on top of large language models, where you can take the existing large language model, whatever it is, pick one of the companies out there that you think is ethical enough for you. You can fix it to remove gender bias. You can fix it with the dataset fine tuning to speak the clean language that you want. You can teach it different languages if your language is not included, you can fine tune it for different languages. That is what people are doing. People are building on top of existing LLM by fine tuning for their languages. And that is what I'm calling on linguists and humanities people to come in and say, now demand that it does this right. And you can clean up the data set, you can contribute new data sets, and that's all in open source. Nobody needs to give you a job to make that happen. But by that you would have contributed to AI, you would have created a portfolio, you would have contributed meaningfully from a place where you bring your knowledge and passion. And you can, move this forward to a job if you want it, or you want it to work for your community or your region or your language, you can make that happen.
Wow. Thanks. Many topics covered. And I think
I always do this.
Great, but that's what we need. I think that's kind of the answer I was looking for. There are so many angles we can look at these problems, and I feel people can be overwhelmed, and it might look like a wave that is overwhelming us, and actually there are ways where we can ride this wave. And I think you gave us a lot of good ideas on how we can possibly become good servers of this wave over the next few years.
That's a beautiful way, good surfers of this wave, right? Because it's a wave, it's beyond us. If we are too overwhelmed, then we'll drown. But we have the skills and we can just, surf past it. We just need to stop. I think it's a little introspection time to think about how do I work? What do I work on? What do I do that? Why was my job successful so far? And how can I translate that into today's language of, transferable skills? And the world needs it. That's the only way we'll go past this uncertain stage to something more stable and beautiful and innovative and create value and move forward.
One positive note that I'm taking from this conversation is definitely that we have an opportunity here for AI to make us more human. And we shouldn't lose this opportunity because it might be one of the last we're going to get. As usual, I mean, you probably covered already the last question, but I want to ask it to you. And you already answered one a few years ago, but I still, after all these things, it would be a nice way to sum up. So what are for you the characteristics of a leader who embraces complexity?
I'm so glad you asked that question because I'm a believer of individual leadership. So when I'm talking to groups in a company or I'm teaching to hundreds of people, I visualize talking to that one individual as my learner. And I believe that, even if there is innovation happening over the years in companies, there is that individual who just got excited about some technology, doesn't have to be AI, or who thought things have to change and be done in a certain way, showed individual leadership. So to your question on leadership traits in uncertain time is to first embrace the uncertainty joyfully, not just like, oh, this happened and things are chaotic and I just need to survive. You're not going to survive and surf the wave if you don't, want to surf the wave and climb up, right? So I think you should look for an opportunity in this and say, okay, this is where it is. And where is the opportunity? How can I harness this uncertainty to build something? And that's a good time for you to do this because everybody is not building and competing with you at the same time. So you have time. So that is embrace the uncertainty joyfully and look for an opportunity is one thing I would say. And the other thing I would say is kind of soul searching. We've been talking about what it means to be human. AI is just reminding us, AI is not making us human. Human AI is not going to take our humanity away. It's just reminded us with the tall claims that AI can do everything that humans can do. It makes us stop and think. So the second thing I would say, a leader should have courage to stop and introspect. What is it that I do good? What is it that I do well? And what is my passion? What have I done in my life that is unique that I bring? And I believe like each of us bring different education, different passions, different skills, and even in the same kind of job titles, we do things differently. And so it shapes our career. So when we look back, we can see a common thread on what we bring. So I think having some introspection to think about what is it that I bring to the table? What is it that I bring to humanity? If you want, you can think about it as your job or your industry or your community or humanity. To whatever extent you dare to go deeper and think about it, that's fine. But that's the second piece. So one is to ride this whole uncertainty, embrace it joyfully, look for an opportunity. Second is to understand your own place here and with introspection, what is your contribution, and boldly take it, right? Don't say, oh, but the AI is doing this job and they won't give me a job if I don't call it this, call it that. Just, stop and think about what you bring. That's the second thing. And third thing is, I think whatever happens, if you are a true leader, you are going to build something, change something, and move forward. So go with optimism. Even if everything is falling apart, it's like, think of this as a new montage. You're going to put this together and create this new montage. You're going to build something new. Here's an opportunity for you. And so now and especially if you're in a job and AI is, changing things, and some jobs are gone, your job is changing, then think about, okay, now what would be the new job? And then one reminder I would tell everyone is being a leader in any form always feels a lonely exercise. So it feels like I'm alone. I lost my job, or my job might go away and things are uncertain. I don't have the skill. You can have all these negative thoughts and make you feel alone. Just remember, everybody is in the same state, alone, right? Everybody today, when things are uncertain, not just in your life, but in the market, everybody is feeling that. But we are all in our own silos. That's one thing, unfortunately, AI is doing to us, right? That it silos us into our own, into our own heads. And we feel like I am alone. Everyone else knows that. That's what I feel about my learners. They are brilliant. They bring business acumen and knowledge and experience and the ability to innovate, but they feel like, oh my God, my career is stagnated, or I'm here and I'm stuck in some way. They feel that, but everyone is stuck like that. And if you stop and zoom out and look at a bigger picture, you will see everyone is in the same state. Now here is a leadership call for you. Get up, take charge, go start building, find other people who are like you if you want to collaborate or lead people, or even if you set an example and start doing things, other people will.
It's very interesting to note as over the years, in your answer, a few things have changed, a few things stay the same. And I think because we have to evolve, but keeping also the good things with us. And so I think was a fascinating way to wrap up our conversation and give every one of us some good tools to face this uncertainty. So thanks a lot, Sudha. Amazing conversation as usual. So I'll point everyone, of course, to the previous interview, but also to your new book website. So if they want to know more about your work. So thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Chris. It's always fun. We always think we are going to talk about something, and then, you're such a brilliant thinker, and I become really smart in front of you. So I love coming to your podcast because, we have such fun conversation, profound conversation. And I feel so optimistic. Every time I finish talking to you, I feel so optimistic about everything. So it's amazing. Thank you so much. We should talk more often.
Thank you, Sudha. Just as a reminder, though, you are the one with 100,000 learners, and my podcast is still a long way to get to your numbers. So thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Chris.